Hello guys, welcome back to The Day Shift. Today we have Simon Johnson on today's episode, and if you haven't already, follow us if you're on Spotify, subscribe if you're on iTunes or YouTube.
So Simon has a very, very interesting career. He's been in lots and lots of different industries. Simon, would you like to introduce yourself and give us a wee rundown of your career?
Good morning to you both. It's a pleasure to be on the programme. Okay, I've had a fascinating career. I've been very lucky in what I've done. I started off as a lawyer, specialising in media, entertainment and sport law. I then moved from there into the world of television, where I was the Director of Business Affairs at ITV, buying sports rights and TV rights. I worked then in the football industry. I was first at the Premier League, and then I was Director of Corporate Affairs at the FA, COO of England's 2018 World Cup bid. I've then done various things since then. I've run a consultancy business. I've been the chief executive of a charity in the Jewish community, the Jewish Leadership Council. And I'm now the non-executive director of a number of businesses. I'm the chair of the Rugby Football League. I'm the chair of a company called SIS, Sports Information Services, and an NED of a couple of other businesses, a firm of accountants and a software development business. So I've moved really into my fifth career. So law, television, sport, charity, and now a world of non-executives.
So, did you do a degree in law?
I did. When I went to university, I did my degree in law because it was my intention that I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a simple solicitor or barrister. And that's what I did. After qualification, I went into into a law firm called Denton Hall. But it was because I was able to specialise in media and sport that opened up a whole range of career development opportunities for me, and it took me in the direction that I've now gone.
Would you say moving about the industry and working on different projects something that you always wanted?
I wouldn't say so. Remember, I've been working now for nearly 30 years. So although I have worked in 5 industries, I've sort of averaged about 6 or 7 years in each of them. I never intended to jump around the way that I did. What I set out to do, and this has served me well in the end, was that each time I moved from one thing to another, that I should try and broaden my experience on each occasion. If I move from one thing to another, am I going to develop more skills, wider experience, and greater exposure to business opportunities than I would staying where I am? So each time that I've moved, it's been a natural progression for me, both in the position of my seniority, but also with the experience that I've been able to gain. So my legal skills helped me to move into television. That enabled me to develop managerial skills, negotiating skills, and so on. Moving from there into the FA gave me the ability to build on all of that and to take a senior management position, to become involved in political and government relations and international relations, dealing with employment and management of larger numbers of staff. That then moved me into a position where I was able to advise businesses and provide consultancy services. That enabled me to develop the skills to be a chief executive and to manage a staff, manage a budget. All of that gave me the skills to be able to become a non-executive director, which was when I became a non-executive director of the Rugby Football League. All of that combined allowed me then to become the chair. So you can see the pattern. Each time I do something, I try to broaden out the experience, the skills, the knowledge, the contacts and the connections that I have. And so whilst it may look as though I've flitted around my career, I've actually at all times tried to keep my options as open as possible so that I can seize opportunities that are created to be able to move on and develop my career.
What you're saying is these opportunities that you've taken are what you personally believe to be a step forward.
Each one has been a progression from the last, as I say. I didn't set out to move into such different industries, but each one was, as I said earlier, a natural progression. Experience in the law helped me to move into a rights business at in television. Experience of television rights enabled me to move into sport. Experience of sport enabled me to move into event management, as I did with the 2018 bid. All of that management skill enabled me to move into charity. what I was able to do was respond to opportunities as they came up. The positive decisions I made a positive decision to leave in-house legal practice to go in, working in a law firm, to work in-house, because I felt there that I would broaden out the skills that I had, and that would widen the opportunities for me in future. Every other opportunity since then has been either because somebody has approached me, or somebody that I've been working with has moved to a new position and wanted to take me with them. So I've been reactive after I made my first move to come out of legal practice. Does that make sense?
So you said that you've been approached. So I'm just thinking, because it's likely that there's a lot of students possibly listening to our podcast, as well as people like in your career possibly. If you're wanting to get approached for a role, how do you make yourself open to being approached? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. Speaking mainly to students, I think one has to be realistic that you're going to be approached after you've done a few years of your career and you've got some experience and reputation under your belt. I think that my experience with what I've done in my career, I hope would tell people at the start of their careers that be as open and as flexible as you can be about the direction that you might want to go. Always try and see how wide your opportunities can be from the position that you've taken. And if you're going to take a new position, think about whether that position will bring you new skills and broader experience to help you get a better job at the end of that. So at some point, if you can do all of that, build your experience, then people will be interested in you and they might approach you, or they might be willing to view favourably your application that you're making through a recruitment consultant, headhunter, or however it might be. At all times, what you should be doing, the advice I would give, is build your network of contacts all the time. Whoever you meet in whatever walk of life that you're in, try and build a rapport with those people. Make sure that you have their contact details and keep in touch. Because I can tell you, looking back at my 30-year career, that there are numerous people that I've worked with right going back to the beginning that I'm still in contact with, that I'm still able to create business connections with, and that are able to be useful with what I'm doing. So to give you one example, just this morning, a former colleague of mine who was with me at the Football Association nearly 18 years ago has just taken a new position in a similar industry to the one that I've just become a chair of, Sports Information Services, SIS. And he contacted me through LinkedIn. We've reconnected. Now that's a contact from 18 years ago, where we've remained broadly in touch. We sort of followed what we were doing. And I'm a big fan of LinkedIn for doing that at the moment. That's not to say that it will always be LinkedIn, but at the moment, that seems to be a good way of people reaching out, making new connections, maintaining contact with existing connections. And therefore my final bit of advice would always be, don't ever fall out with anyone. Always leave on good terms. Always keep in touch. Mm-hmm. Always find the opportunity to notify people what you're doing, because you never know when that contact might well be useful to you from a business or a recruitment perspective.
I remember coming into university, whether that's through webinars or speaking to people or speaking to professors, and everyone was saying networking is such an important tool, don't underestimate it. And personally, I was like, at the time, I didn't understand it. I didn't understand why networking was so important. I thought to become successful, what you need to do is get your head down and do your work. I didn't think that contacts would become such an important part of being able to get yourself through life. But from what you're saying is, there seems to be a bit of like a headhunting culture in the industry. And there's this opinion that if you want to move forward, it's not just about who you know, but also who knows you. So do you resonate with that?
I do. I think it's not just who you know, it's what you know. You mustn't forget that. And it's also who knows you. And there's no mystique or science about networking. It's about being an affable, approachable person who is able to have conversations with people about a range of subjects, able to build a rapport, and is able at the end of it to simply say, let's keep in touch. and to be able to find a way to be able to do that. Crucially as well, it means that when you deal with your work colleagues, as you move into the world of work, particularly your first 2 or 3 careers, jobs that you'll do, it is well worth having a good relationship with those people so that you can keep in contact with them and follow where they go. Because, the diaspora of colleagues that you've worked with will spread into all sorts of directions. And as I said before, you never know when that might be useful to you. So people that I did my training with when I was at the law firm Denton Hall, some of those I'm still in contact with. I know what they're doing. And on 1 or 2 occasions, I've been able to contact them to ask them for help or advice with something I've been doing for a client, or to create an introduction to somebody else. Colleagues of mine from ITV, I'm still working with. And in fact, with my new business that I'm the chair of, SIS, I've reconnected with about 4 or 5 of those because they are in relevant industries. So it's easy for me to say from 30 years worth of experience to, 2 people at the start of your careers, but do keep in touch with people, maintain good relationships, be an affable person that people like to keep in touch with themselves, and then you never know when that might be useful.
Could you give some advice on ways that you keep in touch? Perhaps how often? Maybe for you who has a lot of experience, you feel very comfortable reconnecting with someone that you've previously met, whether that's an introduction to someone else in the industry. For maybe someone who is starting off like Sam and I, it's not as simple as that.
Look, there's no reason not to. You can go a number of years without speaking to somebody as long as your first contact is not, as long as you're, let me phrase that again, as long as it doesn't appear to people that you only want them because you want something out of them. So it's worth keeping in touch with people and tracking what they're doing. As I say, LinkedIn is a good tool at the moment. You can watch people's career moves. So if somebody does something interesting, why not congratulate them on it? Why not send them a little message? If you are in touch with them and you see what they're doing and you've got their number, then send them a text or a message or something on social media. Ask them how they're doing. 2 or 3 months into it, how's everything going? Are you enjoying it? If somebody's moved country, moved city, exchange a view with them. How have you found it? I've done X, Y, and Z. It's just a question of being light about keeping in contact with people. You don't want to drive them mad, but you do want to make sure that they know what they're doing. I also think that people are, particularly people who are more experienced than you, they always never underestimate people's ego. They like to be asked for advice. They don't like to be asked, can you get me a job? But they do like to be asked, what advice would you give me? I'm aspiring to do X, Y, and Z. Might you be able to help? If you make a good impression on those sorts of things, and those people might be able to help you later on down the road. I think I've been helped by one thing. I've never changed my mobile phone number. So in 30 years, the format has changed, but it's always been the same number. So 5 days ago, I got a text from somebody I haven't spoken to for 15 years saying, is this still your number? And it turned out that they were a former senior employee of the company I've just become a chair of. Said, if there's anything I can do to help you. Now, there's something to be said for that. So, if you're at the start of your career, once you give out a mobile number or an email address, make sure that they can keep in contact with you if, for example, you move jobs. Sometimes your work will give you your own number or your own email address. Make sure people can continue to deal with you if you move around. So I've retained at all times a business email address that I make sure that people have got. So as well as whatever is my latest work address, they can always get hold of me.
So just very quickly about LinkedIn, I was actually going to ask you for some advice before you mentioned that, but as someone who has an undefined amount of connections on LinkedIn, when I go in your profile it just says 1,000 plus, and for me who's been trying to grow on LinkedIn and get more connections, how would you advise that you grow? So I've been trying to set a target of 5 comments a week and 1 post a week at a minimum.
Yeah.
Would you say that's a good strategy?
I found it quite useful to write some articles, actually. I found that quite interesting. Now, remember, I've got a few years ahead of you guys, so I've got a lot I can write about that is interesting. But I've been able to write some articles, and that's attracted attention. People then look at your profile. And if you know that people have looked at your profile, then you go and look at them. You maybe reach out to them. I find that each time you make a career move or do something new, people will find you on LinkedIn and they'll be interested in it. And once you know that people have looked at your profile, why not ask them to make a connection? And once they've made a connection, then comment on things that they do. So I think you've got to be quite active on LinkedIn for it to work really effectively. As I say, it's not the only thing, but during the pandemic, when you can't physically network with people, I've found it a very useful way to create new connections, build relationships. It's not easy. That's all. That's the other thing I would say. It's not easy. People are quite protective. So if you write something interesting, if you comment on something that somebody else has done, that's probably the best way to make a contact.
So I believe after you were a lawyer, you were an in-house lawyer at
Correct.
ITV. So what did you do
So
there?
I was responsible for all of our TV rights program buying from a legal perspective, plus sports buying. And when I was at ITV, it coincided with a very happy time in my career. That ITV was doing very well. I was growing and developing quickly through the business. And we did some very interesting things. I bought the rights to competitions like the Premier League for ITV. We had Premier League highlights those days. We had FA Cup rights, World Cup, European Championships, Champions League, Formula One. So I dealt with all of those rights owners, which was very interesting. I was involved in all of our programming. So one of my favourite stories was I was the executive with responsibility for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire from a legal perspective. So if you remember that programme, when it first came out, the host would hand the winners a cheque for the money that they'd won. And I had to make sure there was enough money in the account so that the cheque wouldn't bounce, particularly if someone won £1 million. So I was the legal officer who first received the report from the producer that on one programme a £1 million winner had been suspected of cheating. And you may have seen a TV drama called Quiz about a man who tried to cheat to win £1 million by coughing or having somebody in the audience coughing. So I was involved in that. I was the person who received that report from the production company, and I reported that.
Did someone play you?
No,
on TV?
I was a amalgamation of two characters. Lionel from Legal. It wasn't me, but I reported it to the police. So I started that ball rolling. So no, listen, I had a very exciting time at ITV. Developed great experience, both in management, in rights negotiations, and we did some very high-profile business. So I really enjoyed my time there.
Do you have any insights into the case?
Well, I do, because it was a public case. The guy was prosecuted. He was found guilty. I'm convinced he was guilty. He had a fair trial. He received a suspended sentence, but it was a heck of a story. So,
what was it like at ITV at the time? Like, was it quite shocking for everyone?
It was quite an exciting time at ITV because the program was very successful for us. So we knew that it was high profile, that there would be a lot of interest in it, and I think we just thought this can only help the program.
So there was no panic?
Oh no.
It was like, this is a good thing?
Well, it wasn't good. Someone had tried to cheat us out of £1 million, so we wanted justice to take its course. But no, that was a very interesting time in the career.
It probably brought more viewership to the programme after that.
Well, we couldn't show the actual episode in which the guy had won the £1 million because of the risk of prejudicing the jury. So it was never actually shown until we made a special documentary showing that programme and telling the whole story of the case. And that documentary did very, very well in the ratings. I mean, those were the days when 12 or 15 million people would watch one television programme, and that doesn't happen now. But in the late 1990s, actually, or the early 2000s, when this happened, you were able to get big audiences for programs like that. So yeah, we made the most of it.
I watched it a few months ago, the one that came out. I'm not sure if that's the one you're talking
The drama,
about. Is it Quiz?
yeah, Quiz, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so that's really cool. I didn't expect to get this from the podcast.
There you go.
Yeah, so what did you do next? Was it your
So
World Cup bid?
No,
or?
I moved from there to, firstly, the Premier League. So I wanted to move into the sports industry, and I was there for 18 months. It didn't really work out, I have to be honest, that the job wasn't what I expected it to be, and I think I probably wasn't what the chief executive expected me to be. And so after 18 months, we mutually agreed that it would be best if I moved on. So that was probably the first setback in my career. I mean, we did it amicably, but I was able to move from there to the FA, where the former controller of sport at ITV, who I'd worked with very closely, Brian Barwick, had become the chief executive. And he asked me to go to the FA with him, pretty much as his number two, not officially, and become one of his senior management team. And I was at the FA for 4.5 years working with Brian. And during that time, I helped on all of the aspects that the chief executive was dealing with. Probably the most interesting things I did was I helped with the hiring and firing of the England team manager. That was quite interesting. We had, when I joined, we had a manager called Sven-Goran Eriksson. He attracted a lot of interest from the tabloid media, so there were a number of stories about him in the media. And then in the end, we decided that for various reasons we needed to make a change of the manager. So I was then involved in the recruitment process that brought Steve McLaren as the England manager.
How does the process work?
Well, it depends. There's no real set process, but the employer of the England manager at that time was the FA. It is the FA, and therefore the chief executive of the FA is that person's boss. So it was the chief executive who dismissed each of those managers for whatever reason. And then each time we did a different process. The process that ended up with Steve McLaren was very heavily scrutinised. It didn't really, looking back on it, we made a lot of mistakes with it. It was very high profile. The media at the time scrutinised it to such an extent where people like me and Brian were being followed to see who we were meeting. We were, in the media, very heavily linked with a different candidate than we ended up with. So that process didn't work that smoothly. We ended up with Steve McLaren as the England manager, and he lasted through one qualifying campaign for the European Championships, and then it didn't work out for him. The next process, in which we recruited Fabio Capello, was much more like the recruitment of a CEO. We identified the candidate we wanted. We went to meet him and his agent and lawyer. We did the deal very quickly, within 48 hours, and we brought that person in. So that was we did two different processes. It's all different now, and it really just depends. But that was what we went through at the time that I was at the FA. And then from there, I moved within the FA to be COO of the England 2018 World Cup bid.
I was just interested, was Steve McLaren and Capello your first choice candidates?
That's a very good question. I'm going to give you a journalist answer to the first one and an honest answer to the second one. So the first answer was we ended up with Steve McLaren as our candidate, so he was the only person that we offered the job to, which is my politician's way of answering your first question. And then the second one, Fabio Capello, was our first and only choice.
So you went to CEO of the World Cup?
COO, number 2, Chief Operating Officer.
Okay, so what was your role there?
So my role in the bid was a 2.5-year process, and the way that the responsibilities were divided up, the CEO was in charge of the whole team and the international campaign. As COO, I concentrated on overseeing the technical elements of the bid, so the bid book, the inspection visit. I was also responsible for dealing with government. There was a lot of work that we had to do with government, for dealing with our highest profile ambassadors, including the FA's president, who was Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge at the time, but also the Prime Minister, David Beckham and others. And I was also responsible for our formal relationships with FIFA, and to ensure that we were complying with the FIFA rules of bidding. So that was in a nutshell what I did. So I was part of the senior leadership team, but principally was responsible for the internal technical elements of the bid rather than the external campaign, although of course I was involved in planning meetings that dealt with that. But I was not out there in the field trying to attract votes.
So you said you worked with Prince William, the Prime Minister, and David Beckham.
Yeah.
Did you work directly with them?
Yes, because although it sounds easy now to say that we had the Prime Minister, Prince William and David Beckham in senior positions in our bid, it wasn't easy to achieve that. Firstly, David Cameron didn't become the Prime Minister until the last 6 months of the bid. So we needed to get him involved, and in order to get him involved, we needed to have the government fully supportive of the bid. Prince William, as our president, was uncertain about the profile that he should have within the bid, and so I needed to get to a position that they were comfortable with for his involvement in the bid. And David Beckham, we wanted to be a high-profile ambassador for us, so I was the person who went out to Los Angeles to speak to him and persuade him to join the bid, which he did, and he was superb throughout the process. So because I primarily liaised with, as I say, the royal family and the government, that was where I concentrated my efforts. Once David had become part of the bid, then the campaign team managed his activities, but I kept very closely involved with the President, Prince William, and the Prime Minister.
So I've got two questions. First one is, do you keep in touch with any of them? And the second one is, what were they all like?
And the third, can you get them on the podcast?
So the answer to the third one is no. Am I still in touch with them? I was in touch with Prince William for quite some time, and I've had the opportunity and the good fortune to be at the same events that he's been at and been able to say hello and renew acquaintance. Working with them was a delight. They and their officers were all very professional. They are very professional. They did everything that was asked of them and more. They really became part of the team, and the fact that they were involved with the bid really helped out the public to be associated with the bid and to be positive about it. So it was a very, very good and constructive experience, being able to be involved with such people on such activity.
Obviously the bid was unsuccessful, but would you say it was still a success, if that makes sense?
Well, for me, there was a risk in my career that having been involved with an unsuccessful bid, that could have been very damaging to the career. But I decided to make the most of it and to take advantage of it, because from my perspective, I'd had experiences on the bid that I knew were going to stand me in very good stead for the rest of my career. Firstly, I had dealt at the very, very highest levels with the government. And I'd learnt to work my way around Whitehall with civil servants, with parliamentarians and with government ministers. And that has stood me in good stead ever since. I had worked with the royal family, so I'd understood the way that the royals fit into the way that our society worked. I'd worked very closely with local government, bringing our host cities together, so that I could know my way around local government. And I'd worked at the highest levels with FIFA, so I'd understood how a bid works, what makes a good technical bid and what doesn't. So I decided to use that to my advantage. And actually I was able to run quite a successful consultancy business for 3 years from there, using the skills and the experience that I had. I was the interim chief executive of a lobbying company called Business in Sport and Leisure, which helped to promote the leisure industry, which included pubs, betting companies, gambling, casinos, gyms, leisure centres, that sort of thing. And it was exactly because of the work I'd been able to do with central and local government that meant that I could add value in that particular area. So I made it something that I could work with, that could be an advantage for me. and I made the most out of it. So even though it was unsuccessful, even though the people who, the media and others thought that we'd done a bad job, actually I think if you look at most of the team who were on it, we've all gone on to do quite well and take advantage of the experience that we had.
Yeah, it sounds like an amazing experience as well. You briefly spoke about a consulting company.
Yeah.
What industry was that?
So I set myself up through a consultancy business, SJRB, Simon Johnson Wrights and Business, and I advised companies within the leisure, sport and media industries for 3 years. I still operate that. I still have clients that I look after. But because of what I then did next, which was charity, my company is now advising charities as well on strategy and governance and things like that. But yes, I was able to do good work and build a decent living by working as a consultant for 3 years until I was really out of nowhere approached to become chief executive of the Jewish Leadership Council.
Would it be right to say that you're quite picky with the opportunities you take? I mean, rightfully so. But has there been any opportunities that you perhaps regretted not taking?
No, there's been nothing that I went for that I didn't get. I mean, I have been quite strategic about the choices that I've made. The Jewish Leadership Council, I thought, was something that would be advantageous for me to do at that particular time in my career, for 2 reasons. Firstly, it gave me a chance to be a chief executive, and I was very sure that I wanted to get experience as a chief executive so that I could develop through my career. Secondly, the trustees of the JLC, Jewish Leadership Council, were all significant business people in their own right. And I thought it would be advantageous to be able to work with them because it's always good to meet interesting people, to watch people in other businesses and to have experience of dealing with them. So I actually made quite a strategic decision to do that. And I ended up doing it for 7 years and enjoyed it. And as it happened, that too broadened out my experiences in different things, because I was able to do a lot of strategic advice for not just our charity but our member organisations as well. I was able to develop my experience of governance. I was able to learn about charity governance. I had to deal with a high-profile crisis that affected a charity, so that helped me with crisis management. And then finally, our charity became quite high-profile during that time because, as a representative of the Jewish community, we ended up dealing quite considerably with the media, government and parliamentarians because of the issue of anti-Jewish racism in the Labour Party under the leadership of Jeremy Corbyn. So I did a lot of media interviews. I did a lot of writing of articles, and all of that helped to hone my skills, hone my presentational skills, hone my writing skills, and again just helped me to develop what I'm able to offer to at this stage of my career.
So as CEO of the Jewish Leadership Council, what did you do specifically?
Well, I managed. I know
you've covered a wee bit.
Yeah, I managed the staff. We had over 20 staff. I was responsible for the budget, for dealing with the trustees, for making sure that the charity was well run and governed, was managed in accordance with its strategy, and for representing the charity to the outside world, to government, to parliamentarians, to the media, and so on. So that was my main set of responsibilities. At the same time as when I joined the JLC, I got agreement from the chairman that I could take on some non-executive directorships as well, as long as I didn't spend more than 4 days a month on other activity. And one of the first non-exec directorships I took was with the Rugby Football League. Now, it so happened that the chair of the Rugby Football League was Brian Barwick, who had been my former boss at the FA. So I was he told me about the opportunity. I went through a recruitment process, and I was selected for for that opportunity. And I've been on the board of the Rugby Football League since 2014. And in 2019, when Brian stepped down as the chairman, I became the interim chair myself, and then went through a recruitment process and then became the chair. So I have been the chair of the Rugby Football League since 2019.
What is your role as the chair of the Rugby Football League exactly?
So it's a non-executive part-time role. So my responsibility is to chair the board and to chair the council and to be responsible for the good governance of the sport. I'm also responsible for managing the chief executive officer and ensuring that the leadership runs effectively and in accordance with the board's responsibilities. And I have an ambassadorial role within the sport as well, representing the sport, again, to government, to Sport England, on formal occasions. I also am, if you like, the host of our events like the Challenge Cup final and international events. So I am part of the presentation team that will present the Challenge Cup trophy to the winners. I'll be the host of all of our guests on the day. And so, yes, it's a mixture of governance, management of the board, ambassadorial, and overseeing the leadership.
Have you had any involvement with how the Rugby Football League would transition in and out of the pandemic? Was that quite a big challenge for you?
Well, yes, it was, because obviously matters that relate to the profit and loss of the business, or to the way that we operate, or the application of the rules, does require board approval. So when the pandemic started, we had to make a decision whether to pause our sport and whether to stop playing. So that was a board decision. So actually, as soon as the pandemic started, I called board meetings every other day, every Monday, Wednesday and Friday throughout the pandemic, just to make sure that we as a board were on top of the decisions that we needed to make. Firstly, suspending the sport, then seeking government support for our clubs, then enabling the financial sustainability of the sport, making a whole range of decisions that needed to be made. And I think you'll find that during the pandemic, the directors of most businesses will have gone to regular meetings with their executives, because people's businesses, their profit and loss accounts, their balance sheets were being impacted as soon as the pandemic came about. So ours in a different way from others, but still needed heavy scrutiny from the board.
So my next question is, you've obviously... Actually, I've got three. I keep doing this. Okay, so my first question is, did you ever do a job that you didn't enjoy?
I never did a job I didn't enjoy. My time at the Premier League wasn't the happiest I had, because I didn't have a good relationship with the chief executive, and it made for a difficult environment. I enjoyed the job, and I really benefited from being there, but it wasn't really a happy time from a work relations perspective. But that was really it.
Yeah, just how would you advise people to be more open to change and adapting to new environments like you have?
I think it's quite natural. It was quite difficult for me, because at the time I started out on my career, it was still expected that you would work for the same company for the whole of your career. I certainly haven't done that. I think now very few people expect to work the same company for the whole of their career. I think I've been able to, by having an open attitude to flexibility, to being willing to learn, to being willing to go into businesses and learn about them very quickly, I've sort of embraced change. And in order to do that, I've needed to be flexible. I've needed to have that flexibility to be able to pick up the new business, new clients very quickly. So in the last 3 weeks, I've been appointed as chair of SIS. So they're a company that is a supplier of services to the betting industry, pictures, data, content, and all sorts of other things. It's an industry that I was familiar with because of my time at Business in Sport and Leisure. They're involved in rights negotiations, which is what I did at ITV. And I understand the way boards work because of my time at the RFL. But I've had to get across their business very, very quickly. in order to be the chair, in order to chair board meetings, in order to work with the management team on the profit and loss account, the long-term strategy, and so on. I enjoy the challenge of doing that. I really enjoy the challenge of learning about new businesses, getting under their skin quickly. That's been my approach. That willingness to embrace change and to do different things, I've benefited from. So I would say it's worked for me. It might be worth trying. I think being willing to try new things and to not be shy about undertaking new businesses, applying your skills to learn about new businesses, I think there's something very, very exciting about that.
So you're obviously very, very busy with all your different roles. How do you fit in like your own personal time with family or going to the cinema post-pandemic?
You can't go to the cinema at the moment. No,
Yeah.
I think it's a very good question, because I think that work-life balance is extremely important. And I think busy people can have a good work-life balance. I try very hard to have my evenings free. It's not always possible. I often will have to sit in front of my computer and do something or take a phone call, but I do try and keep my evenings free. I try during the day to always make sure that I have a break at lunchtime. And if it's going to be a long day, that I take a break around 6 o'clock to have dinner, just to be able to get, my head out of work and into doing something else. I'll give one other advantage for what I do, and that comes from my religion. I'm Jewish, and we have something called the Jewish Sabbath, the Shabbos, that starts Friday night and runs through Saturday. And I observe that Sabbath. So I don't look at my phone, or I try not to. I don't work, I don't take meetings, I don't take phone calls. And that 24 hours away from your smartphone, your computer, with your time with your family, and just to think, to read, to reflect, to be away from work, I find it very refreshing. So that actually by Sunday afternoon, once I've watched football or whatever, I'm actually ready to start work again. So, it's about using the time that you have for yourself and using it constructively. I watch television, I watch sport, I read, I try to study new things. I'm often quite interested in reading books that can give me new insights into things. So, it's about using your free time to do something you enjoy constructively. But I also love walking, I love being outside, and I love being with the family. So you got to make your time to do all of those things.
You might have just mentioned it there, but in moments of stress, where maybe you are feeling things or your projects are getting a bit heavy, what is your stress management thing that you do?
We have a dog, so I find walking the dog can be very helpful. I take the dog for a nice long walk and just get outside. We've got a couple of parks near where we live. Get out to look at something green, look at some trees. Just get yourself away from what you're working with and just think about something else. In due course, you'll come back to what's stressful. I think the other thing that I find really important, I always try and ensure that I get a good night's sleep. For me, if I've got a really difficult problem, to answer your question there, James, if something has been stressful, I might just stop there and I might take the evening and I'll have an early night. I'll go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, I'll find that the problem is nowhere near as stressful as it was the day before, and that I'm able to come up with new solutions that wouldn't have been available to me the previous night. There is everything to be said for having a good night's sleep, because you just feel different in the morning. You can approach things in a whole new way.
My final question is, what is next for you, Simon?
Look, the main thing I've tried to do through my career is to enjoy what I do. And I'm very privileged now to have the chairmanship of two fascinating businesses, the Rugby Football League and SIS. I'm determined to enjoy both of those roles. Both of them have got the opportunity to last for at least 3 years and maybe beyond. So I intend to enjoy what I do with those. I've got the two other non-exec directorships with H.W. Fisher and Eventis. I intend to really just enjoy giving my best to all of those companies, learning what I can, and then let's see what happens in 5 or 6 years' time. Maybe there's something that I can do then that is another chair position in an equally high-profile role, You never know. What I'm doing now is what I've done all my career. Do what I'm doing now to the best of my ability. Generate as much experience, connections, contacts as I can, and just see where that takes me.
So anyways, Simon, it's been great having you on today, and there's certainly a lot to take in. But I hope you really enjoyed coming on speaking here on The Day Shift.
It's been great to chat with you, guys. It's been very interesting, and as I say, I wish you both the best of luck with what you're doing. I think this is a great idea. You're trying to bring different people so that students and others can hear it. Keep doing what you're doing, keep on learning, and if I can help you in any way in the future, be sure to be in touch.
Great, thank you.